think your answer is just a nice bridge to it, Barbara, from Josh Wagner. Josh, thank you for the question. Josh is one of our LPs. And the question is basically, how can we exploit lunar resources, but in a sustainable manner? All of your companies have, are now part of this early rush to the moon to explore and exploit, as Mark has put it. How can we make sure that we don't do there or commit the same errors that we've committed here on Earth, and enjoy the fruits of a sustainable exploration of the moon? Let's start with you, Mark, if you don't mind.
Well, there are many ways to to utilize the moon. I can say what we've focused on at Lone Star is entirely sustainable, and in fact, it helps with Earth's sustainability in the sense that we can provide. First of all, for the moon, you're initially going to be powered by solar sources. There are going to have to be additional power sources in use, but you get just in the case of solar, you get a lot more energy per square meter on the moon than you do get on Earth. And since we're working in more of the edge computing and data storage environment, you don't have any of the Earth heating. You could have, like, say, an obvious example would be, say, cryptocurrency. If you're doing data mining on the moon, you can do that in an entirely green way. You could have the first green currency, actually. And whereas on Earth, it takes a lot of compute power and a lot of heat that goes into the atmosphere that people tend to overlook. I mean, crypto by itself sucks down an enormous amount of utilities. Now, that's a significant amount of power to generate and significant infrastructure on the moon if you were to replicate it all. But as an illustration, that would be an example. And then in addition to that, we're also focused on providing data services to science and technology development on the moon, and then providing the right bandwidth for all of these opportunities to proliferate. So I think on the data services side of it, edge computing and storage, it's entirely sustainable by itself on the moon, but it can also remove some of that climate impact from the Earth.
So, Mark, great response there. This is actually a very interesting question, and it's something that we need to think about, before we go out there. Sometimes because of political push, we can just rush and settle and do whatever, and then later on we go, oh, now what? and we've been through it before here, right? We've seen some of the things that we've done in the past, and now learning from all our mistakes. I think there are some things that we can do, and in our now what we are focusing on is not taking toxic stuff to the moon, basically, because if you like at least here, at least on the planet, you can release toxics. I mean, it's bad for the environment, but you can at least release toxics into the air. There are ways to prevent exposure to toxics by humans, right? However, on the moon, because there's no oxygen, because there's no there's nothing out there. A lot of the equipment, a lot of the tools that we use are going to be like we're going to be like confined in certain spaces. So the thing is, if we continue to use, let's say, hydrogen, for example, hydrogen is the most common propellant used to power spacecraft like satellites and landers and things like that. Now, if as we increase lunar activity, Yeah, they're imagine powering all these landers and rovers with hydrazine. That is just that's a huge problem waiting to happen. And before we go too far, continuing to use hydrazine, that we want to say, well, we want to transition. We want to help transition from using hydrazine to using something that's completely, almost entirely non-toxic, and it's not. If you're exposed to it, it doesn't. There's still ways of getting escaping from it, and basically the worst thing that happens is you get some skin irritation, and that's about it. And of course, as long as you don't drink the propellant, you should be okay. But like we've people that handle hydrazine can tell you that it is some nasty stuff. It's been lab tests have shown that it's carcinogenic. So it's anyway, as we start exploring the moon, and as we start working in some of these confined spaces, we really need to be careful about not taking toxic chemicals and making the whole process more difficult than it needs to be.
Understood. Thank you, Miguel. Barbara, what's your view on this?
I can't agree more with Mark and Miguel. I think sustainability and reusability is also something that we need to take into all our design principle when it comes to designing a base on the moon. And not only the base, I agree also the question of the propellant and how we get there. And I think this is something that needs to be like pretty much mandatory in all our approach on designing the system that we're going to use on the moon. And we should be very careful with that, because I agree with the pressing agenda and all the political pressure right now, and the relationship and what's happening right now with Russia, which is absolutely not helping. And I agree we should be very careful, because there is a risk that getting caught in this crazy race, we just we move forward too quick, and we reiterate some of the stupid mistakes we already made on Earth. Though I'm pretty much I'm very optimistic that a lot of people that are working in designing future system and solutions that are going to be used on the moon, we are very concerned about sustainability and reusability, and this is something that we all share in our core. So I'm pretty positive, but I think we should be overall careful.
So really, that is one of the reasons why I started Lunazon, is how do we explore materials sustainably on the surface? And I think one of the obviously the largest topics when it comes to lunar exploration is mining and resource extraction. And our goal is that there will be no open pit mining on the moon. There's going to be no kind of these scattershot approaches towards extracting resources, but by knowing exactly where a given resource is, we'll be able to pinpoint and more or less do surgery on the lunar subsurface, where you can extract a certain metal that's in a given localized area without having to remove a huge amount of regolith in order to find a material. So we think that really a technology like ours is going to be extremely helpful in sustainable lunar development.
We agree, but we are biased, Jeremiah. But guys, just moving on. Roberto Alvarez, our venture partner, had a question here. But what is the missing link, or what's missing right now to speed up the sustainable development of the moon? And then in connection with that, as our time approaches, I'd like to ask each one of you just to tell us what you're excited to see in the next 5-10 years in terms of moon exploration development.
The most important thing, let's parse it. Technology first. The most important thing, I think, is power. We have to have an improved power solution for the moon. It's a 14-day lunar night. it gets cold enough to crack a battery. We need to be able to not just survive, but to thrive through the night. And so I think power becomes a really significant limitation. There are a number of other technologies involved that, depending on what the particular application is, but from a basic infrastructure technology, that's top of my list. I would also, I think it's very interesting that Robert mentioned legal frameworks. One thing that we have spent a lot of time on at Lone Star is making sure that we have the right legal framework to be able to offer our services. And so the way we've structured it is, and you can read a recent law review article that we just published, that we have different the moon is not owned by anyone, but a country with a presence on the moon does have a jurisdiction or a sovereignty, if you will, without getting into the legal definitions of sovereignty. And our intent is that, and we've laid this out in the legal argument, is that we can have a multi-jurisdiction location because of how we've structured the effort. And so some data is very sensitive, and there can be legal restrictions in not being able to put it outside your country's border, for example. And you can see now that countries are beginning to create data embassies where they're taking critical data and they're actually storing them in embassies in other countries as backups because they're under an existential threat, like in the Baltics. And that's where this example is taken from. So we've got that same structure, but on the moon, so that if you need to be off planet, but in country, we can accommodate that.
I agree with the power. It's a big problem. It gets really, really cold, and we need to figure this out. It's not going to be only about the insulation and how the habitat and the structure is going to protect us, but there is really a power optimization and a source of power that needs to be more, that needs and require technology development and innovation right now. In terms of one of the things that I'm the most excited of in the coming years, I mean, of course I'm biased because of what we've been working on, but for me it's really about building a permanent presence for humans on the moon. I think it's gonna be it's really going to change everything that people think about space exploration. It never happened before. It's like for first time we're settling on another on another celestial body than the Earth. So that's really mind blowing, and it's gonna be and everyone will watch this. So like the entire planet will have their eyes on humans settling on the moon, and that's and I think it's yeah, I think it's really it's super inspirational, and it's probably gonna change a lot of what's happening on Earth and the behavior of people, and even how they behave with our planet, because they will grow and we will grow an even bigger consciousness of how precious it is what we have right now on Earth. So that's what's getting me really excited.
Apologies for the noise. We're mixing propellant downstairs.
If it wasn't you, I wouldn't believe it.
Don't worry, it's non-toxic. It'll be fine. So anyway, we're going to be testing a rocket engine pretty soon, hopefully next week. So that's what we're preparing for the test. But going back to the topic, so the missing link really is more public. I mean, for me, this is based on what I've experienced. More public awareness, more more interest from the public, from the business sector, from the general public about the value of going to the moon, about the value of going to space. I think that what Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson did last year, by going to space. So what they did, on one side, some people thought, oh yeah, those rich guys, they whatever. But then at the same time, what that did is also just bring more people curious about what's going on. And now with more people going to space, like even Pete from Saturday Night Live, it just brings more people to this industry. Because earlier, like Steven said, in this industry. This industry is still perceived to be like really capital intensive, only for big corporations, for big governments, and the time to revenue is long, and like all that stuff. But as you guys are showing here, some of the companies in the portfolio already have revenue, and even in our model, we have a business plan that allows us to generate revenue sooner than later. And anyway, there are many opportunities for investment in space that are quicker, and there are a lot of cool things. And also the biggest link, the biggest link that's missing with the general public is that a lot of people just are not aware of how space exploration, how activities on orbit and even on the moon impact their daily lives. And I'm glad that there are more people in the media, more people just speaking more about it. And I'm glad that we're doing these things, taking rich people to orbit or at least suborbit. So just to get bring more people interested, because it would be awesome. I think once we realize like how impactful space is for humanity, we'll see a lot more investment going into it. Just like the internet, for example, way back in the 80s, for example, it was something that only government people and big corporations talked about. In fact, back in the 90s, if you guys remember the AOL days, back then, if you had an AOL account, you were considered to be nerdy. You're socially inept. But now everybody has Facebook. Everybody has a LinkedIn profile, and you're nobody if you don't have one. So it's a whole it's a complete change of mindset. So I hope that we get there soon.
So I would say that the gap in terms of lunar exploration and exploitation, I think is still transportation. It's always been transportation, in my opinion, but at the end of the day, the only options to get to the moon now are very much fairly low mass, high price per kilogram. Even some of the private companies out there, I remember we considered doing a lunar project, and it was something like $2 million for a half a U of space. And as long as prices are like that there really isn't going to be commerce in lunar orbit or lunar surface. And so I think that's still something that needs to be addressed. I think SpaceX is doing a great job of pushing that towards something that's more affordable, and hopefully with some of the other ventures, we start to see a shift in that direction. But I think that's still the rate limiting step when it comes to starting business activity in lunar space. And kind of along those lines, I would say that the thing I'm most excited about is SpaceX's development of the Starship rocket. I think that is really going to open up lunar space for commerce for sure.
Very well, thank you. And also, we unfortunately have to end here. Our time's up. So I wanted to thank all the panelists for joining us. Thank you for your insight. And hopefully we'll continue this conversation in a different forum at some point. Thank you, guys.